Tonight, we're going to dive into a fascinating and somewhat strange chapter of history, the story of a top-secret British project during World War II. This project was called Habakkuk, and it involved the creation of an aircraft carrier, made entirely of ice. It may sound like something out of a science fiction story, but it's a true part of history. The project was developed during the early 1940s, when the world was embroiled in the chaos of World War II. The British were looking for ways to protect their ships from German attacks and secure their dominance over the seas. But instead of building a traditional aircraft carrier, they had an incredibly unconventional idea: an aircraft carrier made from a material that's cold and solid, ice. Habakkuk was the brainchild of a Canadian engineer named Geoffrey Pyke, who was working with the British military at the time. Pyke proposed building a massive floating platform made out of a mixture of ice and wood pulp, which he called Pykrete. This material was incredibly strong, far stronger than regular ice, and could withstand the weight of aircraft and even attacks from enemy torpedoes. Why ice? Well, the idea behind Project Habakkuk was to create a huge, unsinkable floating base that could support the Royal Navy's aircraft. With the threat of German submarines and air raids looming large over the Atlantic, the British needed a way to provide more cover for their ships and aircraft. Traditional aircraft carriers were vulnerable, but a floating ice base, it was believed, could be much safer. It could be built far away from the reach of the enemy, and, if it ever became damaged, it could simply be replaced, all thanks to the unique properties of Pykrete. Pyke's design was ambitious. He proposed constructing an aircraft carrier that was over 2,000 feet long, longer than most modern-day aircraft carriers. The project was to be carried out in the Arctic, where the ice could provide a natural foundation. At first, the idea was met with skepticism, but when scientists tested Pykrete, they found it to be incredibly strong, so strong, in fact, that it could even withstand gunfire and torpedo impacts. This gave the project a real sense of possibility. To give you a better idea of what Pykrete was, it was a mixture of 14 parts ice to 1 part sawdust. It was remarkably durable, and it was also able to float on water, much like ice. In fact, it was so strong that it could be shaped into giant blocks to form the framework of the ship. While the idea of using ice for a naval project may sound strange, it made sense at the time. The material was cheap, available, and could be easily produced in the vast quantities needed. The British began testing the concept, constructing a small prototype of Habakkuk in Canada. This prototype, known as the Habakkuk test structure, was built on a lake and was intended to demonstrate that a large floating ice structure could indeed support aircraft and withstand the harsh conditions of the North Atlantic. It was a groundbreaking experiment, one that showcased the creative and daring thinking that was needed to overcome the challenges of war. Unfortunately, despite its potential, the Habakkuk project faced insurmountable obstacles. The materials required to build such a massive floating ice structure were difficult to gather in large quantities, and the cost of production began to soar. Furthermore, advancements in military technology, such as faster aircraft and improved radar systems, made the concept of a giant ice aircraft carrier less practical. As a result, the project was eventually abandoned in 1943. Though the Habakkuk was never completed, it remains one of the most unusual and creative ideas in military history. Imagine the sight of a massive, floating ice carrier, moving silently through the cold waters of the Atlantic, surrounded by the roar of fighter planes taking off and landing. It's a true testament to the inventive thinking that can arise during times of conflict. Today, the legacy of Habakkuk lives on as a reminder of how necessity can drive innovation, no matter how bizarre the solution might seem. It also serves as a reflection of the extraordinary lengths to which nations were willing to go to try and gain an advantage during the most intense period of modern warfare. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, remember the story of the ice aircraft carrier and the daring individuals who dreamed of such an extraordinary vessel. While it may never have been built, it stands as a fascinating and little-known chapter of history that proves how creativity and innovation can thrive even in the most unlikely places. Good night, and thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most unusual ideas ever proposed during World War II.